The Genesis you know isn't the only one. Before Adam, even before Eve, humanity told another story about its origins. A story where life wasn't born from a rib, but from a womb. Where the sacred was feminine, the earth was mother, and creation pulsed in every cycle of nature, in every breath, every heartbeat. This truth was brutally erased, systematically dismantled piece by piece across millennia, and you never knew. If you feel like the modern world has amputated something vital from your soul, a deep connection, a sense of belonging to something ancient and profound, then this video is for you. Subscribe to the channel now and leave a like, because what you're about to hear, what we're about to unveil, is a history carefully hidden, a whisper from the deep past that no one else dares to tell you. Archaeology, the quiet whispers from the dust of forgotten civilizations, reveals symbols far older than any written scripture, more ancient than the scrolls of Moses or the tablets of Mesopotamia. We find countless female statues, their forms ample and nurturing, often depicted with exaggerated hips and breasts, symbolizing fertility and abundance. We see lunar totems, intricately carved, charting the moon's phases, a clear link to the feminine cycle and the rhythms of nature. There are paintings in ancient caves, not just of hunts, but of communal dances, ceremonies marking life, death, and profound rebirth, with women often at the center, figures of reverence and power. Spirituality, in this dawn of human consciousness, was fundamentally cyclical. It mirrored the seasons, the waxing and waning of the moon, the ebb and flow of blood and tides. Divinity wasn't some distant, judgmental entity. Divinity was nature itself, alive and breathing. The sacred wasn't perched high above the world, demanding awe from afar. It was deeply, intimately within it, pulsating in the very earth, in every living creature, in every human body. There was no concept of a fiery hell, no endless, terrifying, eternal punishment for perceived transgressions. There was simply the natural process of death, an inevitable transition followed by return, by rebirth, by regeneration. These ancient rituals, meticulously recorded by the hands of our ancestors over 30,000 years ago, vividly show cults inextricably linked to fertility, to the sacred flow of menstrual blood, once seen as life-giving and mystical, and to the miraculous rebirth of the earth after winter's slumber, before the thundering pronouncements of Yahweh, before the lightning bolts of Zeus, before the singular decrees of Allah, there was the goddess. She was not a figure of rigid control. She didn't demand blind, unquestioning adoration, nor did she issue commandments from on high. She was the cycle itself, the fertile, wet earth, the miraculous womb, and the bountiful harvest. Her essence was woven into existence. She demanded no sacrifice of flesh or spirit. She was the very flow of life, self-sustaining, ever-renewing. This primordial feminine force, this sacred goddess, appeared under a kaleidoscope of names and forms across continents and cultures. She was Gaia in ancient Greece, the earth itself; Inanna, the queen of heaven and earth for the Sumerians; Ishtar for the Babylonians, goddess of love, war, and fertility; Astarte for the Canaanites; Cybele, the great mother of Anatolia. Different names, yes, but always the same core essence. Life as an unending mystery that perpetually regenerates itself, blooming from darkness, returning to it and blooming anew. The captivating figures of the Great Mother, those ancient, powerful effigies, appear from the cold plains of Eastern Europe all the way to the sun-baked south of Anatolia. The astonishing temple of Çatalhöyük in present-day Turkey, a sprawling Neolithic city, provides irrefutable evidence of a profound worship of fertility, death, and rebirth, dating back more than 9,000 years. Other monumental archaeological finds in Malta, with its impressive megalithic temples, on the sun-drenched island of Crete, home of the Minoans, and throughout the vast Indus Valley civilizations, all point unmistakably to sophisticated spiritual practices where the feminine was undeniably the central force. In these societies, there was no oppressive vertical hierarchy, no kings or priests dictating from above. Decisions were collective, arrived at through communal wisdom and consensus. Rituals were communal, shared celebrations that bound communities together, celebrating life's passages and the earth's bounty. But this world, this ancient, balanced, deeply connected world, began to collapse. With the dawn of agriculture, a shift occurred. Humans began to settle, to cultivate fields, and with cultivation came the concept of property, owning land, owning resources, owning harvests. And with property came the patriarchy, a system where power and lineage shifted from the maternal to the paternal. And with the patriarchy came the sword, not just as a weapon of war, but as a symbol of dominance, of control, of forceful imposition. The sacred, once intertwined with the body, was brutally separated from the body. The vibrant, instinctual human body was domesticated, its wildness tamed, its desires often shamed. The woman, once revered as the fount of creation, as the very embodiment of the sacred, was systematically demonized. What was once the sacred womb, the source of all life, turned into a source of shame, something to be hidden, controlled. What was once innate wisdom, passed down through generations of women, turned into heresy, a dangerous threat to the new order. The priestesses, the wise women, the healers, the guides of ancient rites were brutally branded as witches, and the merciless fires of the pyres extinguished not just lives, but centuries of living memory, burning away a profound ancestral connection. They severed the vital link to the mystery, to the sacred flow of life, and in its place, they offered guilt, a heavy burden on the human soul. They cut the nourishing blood of the earth, and in its stead, they demanded sacrifice and instilled a pervasive sense of sin. Today, this forgotten religion, this ancient current of wisdom, still pulses with an undeniable energy. It echoes in the haunting chants from the corners of ancient ruins, those silent witnesses to forgotten truths. It vibrates in the powerful rhythmic dances of indigenous peoples who still hold on to their ancestral ways. It lives in the rites that refuse to bend, passed down secretly, stubbornly, across generations. It manifests in the persistent dreams that insist on repeating the same ancient symbols, images that resonate deep within our collective unconscious. It's hidden in the words we can no longer fully translate, remnants of a language that spoke directly to the soul. It weaves through the myths that repeat themselves across disparate cultures, carrying a common thread of a lost wisdom. And it's undeniably present in the natural cycles that the modern world stubbornly insists on ignoring. Cycles of life, death, and renewal that govern everything. The burning question isn't merely whether this primordial religion existed. The overwhelming evidence confirms it did. The true question is, why did they go to such immense, brutal lengths to utterly erase it? And more profoundly, what happens to us, to our world, when this suppressed memory finally awakens? The first religion was brutally deleted because it controlled absolutely no one. On the contrary, it liberated. It celebrated autonomy, connection, and the inherent sacredness of existence. And systems that genuinely liberate the human spirit, that refuse to bow, do not survive empires built on dominion, hierarchy, and conquest. They systematically erased the goddess, meticulously dismantling her power and presence. In her place, they began erecting gods in their own image, more armed, more vengeful, distinctly and overwhelmingly masculine. With the relentless ascension of patriarchal societies, the ancient myths, the very foundational stories of humanity, were systematically rewritten. The goddess, who was once the unquestioned creator, the very source of all being, was deliberately demoted, reduced in status, often to a secondary or even villainous role. In her towering place, there arose new figures, warrior gods, fierce and imposing, lords of the heavens and of war. Figures like Yahweh, with his wrathful commandments, Marduk, the Babylonian god who conquered the primordial chaos, Baal, the storm god of the Levant. All of them emerge as dominant, powerful figures who triumph over the very chaos that, in older myths, was often embodied by a feminine principle, a primordial mother sea or serpent. The entire narrative inverted. The uterus, which was once universally revered as the sacred portal of creation, the very gateway to life itself, shockingly came to be associated with impurity, with sin, with something to be controlled and even despised. The woman, who had once been the ultimate symbol of sacred mystery, of intuition, of life-giving power, tragically became a symbol of temptation, of danger, of original sin. The ancient priestesses, those wise women who skillfully conducted intricate rites of healing, of death's passage, and of bountiful harvest, were ruthlessly replaced by male priests, by scribes who meticulously guarded the written word, asserting their authority through codified texts. What was once transmitted organically through the vibrant energy of dance and the sacred wisdom of blood was now rigidly sealed in parchments, in books, controlled by an elite few. The texts of the Old Testament are undeniably clear in their patriarchal structure. Genealogies pass exclusively from father to son, establishing a male lineage of power. Authority descends from above, from a distant God who demands absolute obedience, sacrifice, and fear. In this new framework, there is simply no conceptual space for the vital, pulsing sacredness that was once so deeply rooted in the earth, in the body, in the feminine. This profound displacement was not merely symbolic, it was a deeply political and social maneuver. Societies began to rigorously organize themselves around the principles of war, of ruthless conquest, and of aggressive possession, of land, of people, of resources. And crucially, everything that evoked the feminine principle, everything that hinted at the ancient, non-hierarchical ways, was systematically seen as a profound threat to this emerging order. The serpent, an ancestral, universal symbol of rebirth, of wisdom, of healing, was cunningly twisted and turned into a demon, a representation of evil and temptation. The menstrual cycle, once revered as a sacred, powerful, even mystical process, transformed into a taboo, something dirty, shameful, hidden away. Even the moon, once a mighty goddess, a celestial guide, was relegated to mere decoration, stripped of her divine power. It was nothing short of a narrative coup, a masterful reframing of reality. It was a complete domestication of the sacred, ripping it from its wild, inherent power and encasing it in rigid dogma. And perhaps most tragically, it was a profound amputation of the collective human soul, severing our innate connection to the feminine principle of creation and wisdom. For if the feminine were truly remembered, if her power and essence were acknowledged, the very foundation of these new empires built on control and dominance would inevitably crumble. And so the myths were ruthlessly molded. Eve was made subservient, created from a mere rib of Adam, forever secondary. Lilith, the defiant, powerful first woman who refused submission, was completely erased from the narratives, demonized and forgotten. The goddess herself was demonized, her very existence distorted into evil. And what was left behind for humanity was a religion based solely on obedience, on following rules and doctrines, rather than on direct experience, on inner wisdom, on ecstatic connection. But the goddess's seeds are still deeply in the ground, resilient and waiting, and memory doesn't die so easily. If the past is indeed rewritten, twisted, and manipulated by the victors, then perhaps it is profoundly time to listen intently to the silences of the vanquished, to the echoes from those who were suppressed, because there, in those forgotten spaces, resides the raw, bleeding truth that still yearns to be heard. While the official world was relentlessly erecting towering cathedrals, building imposing institutions, and solidifying its dogmatic narratives, something vital, something essential, persistently lingered underground. It survived in the quiet solitude of the fields, still tilled by hands that remembered ancient rhythms. It echoed in the hushed whispers of midwives, passing down knowledge that transcended official texts. It was guarded in the secrets passed meticulously from mother to daughter, a sacred chain of knowledge, unbroken. The original religion, this profound connection to the feminine sacred, never truly disappeared entirely. It shrewdly hid itself in seemingly innocent lullabies, sung over cradles. It was concealed within the potent wisdom of herbs, gathered for healing and magic. It emerged in the vivid, recurring dreams that transcended the waking world's imposed realities. It lived on in legends that spoke of powerful goddesses disguised as common women, walking among us, their true nature hinted at in their wisdom and strength. It camouflaged itself brilliantly within seemingly harmless popular traditions, the folklore of the common people. It persisted in the joyous harvest festivals, still celebrating the earth's bounty, though their original sacred meaning was blurred. It endured in rites of passage, marking life's transitions, even as their names changed. It mixed itself cleverly with the new dominant narratives, weaving itself into the fabric of daily life. It resisted with incredible tenacity, even when brutally burned, tortured, and suppressed. It always found a way back, returning in another form, another guise. With each passing generation, the ancient flame, though dimmed, rekindled itself, disguised as innocent folklore, as quaint superstition, as a rustic, humble ancestral wisdom. Deep in the interior of medieval Europe, even under the suffocating dominion of Christian rule, there persisted countless practices that directly harked back to ancient agrarian cults, to the rites of the Earth Mother. Records of the brutal witchcraft trials of those centuries often describe, in chilling detail, women who possessed uncanny knowledge of the moon's cycles, of the sacred properties of blood, of the healing and magical power of plants. These weren't the evil, cackling witches of later propaganda. They were, in essence, priestesses without temples, their sacred spaces destroyed. They were living libraries, their minds vast storehouses of knowledge, women who perhaps never learned to read the new written scriptures, but who deeply knew how to heal, how to birth new life, how to bury the dead with reverence. The persecution they faced was unspeakably brutal, the pyre horrifyingly efficient in its destruction of bodies. But the memory, that deep inherent knowing, simply refused to burn. Every single woman silenced, every life extinguished, was like a page ripped from a sacred book that was tragically never allowed to be fully written. Yet the echo of their voices still hauntingly assails the empty corridors of official history, a persistent reminder of what was lost. Today, in our hyper-connected yet strangely disconnected times of complex algorithms and towering concrete jungles, this subterranean memory begins to pulse with renewed intensity. It returns not as a rigid religion, but as a profound remembrance. Not as unbending dogma, but as a deep, undeniable intuition. It lives vividly in the hearts of those who instinctively feel that something fundamental is missing, a profound emptiness. It lives in those who are desperately seeking meaning, not in abstract heavens, but in the tangible earth, in the felt body, in the vibrant landscape of dreams. What was so meticulously buried, so forcefully suppressed, is unmistakably stirring. And perhaps, just perhaps, it's finally poised to return to the surface, to break through the veneer of modern life. And when it does, when this ancient, undeniable spirituality re-emerges, what will the modern world, so reliant on control and reason, do in the face of a spirituality that doesn't demand temples or rigid dogmas, but merely asks for presence and truth? The 20th century, with all its technological marvels, brought us unprecedented information and global connection, but it also brought a pervasive anxiety, a gnawing emptiness, and a subtle, invisible sensation of profound loss. Amidst all the relentless march of progress, something absolutely essential, something deeply human, was left tragically behind. In recent years, we have seen a beautiful and powerful resurgence of practices deeply linked to the ancestral feminine. The formation of women's circles, gatherings of shared wisdom, the growing interest in forest medicine connecting to natural healing, the return to lunar astrology, understanding our rhythms through the moon, and a profound rediscovery of body wisdom, listening to our own innate intelligence. These practices aren't mere fads, fleeting trends. They are undeniable symptoms of a memory that is re-emerging, surging from the depths of our collective past. There is a powerful collective call, a resonance that transcends distinct cultures and geographical continents, signaling a profound return to the symbolic womb, to the sacred essence that pulses vibrantly in our deepest instincts, in the profound silence of introspection, and in the very fabric of our skin. In countless indigenous cultures around the world, wisdom isn't codified in books. It's passed down orally by older women, the matriarchs who carry the ancestral lineage. They don't rely on written texts, but on powerful stories. They don't deliver formal sermons, but offer subtle yet profound signs and guidance. And this ancient tradition is now re-emerging with surprising force among young urban dwellers, particularly young women who instinctively reject the soul-crushing logic of the market, the relentless drive for consumption. This burgeoning spirituality doesn't crave temples. It hungers for presence. It doesn't demand dogmas. It yearns for authentic experience. It doesn't seek some distant heaven. It profoundly seeks its roots in the earth. The sacred feminine isn't about rigid gender roles. It's about a deep reconnection with the mystery, with the cyclical nature of existence, with the living, breathing earth. The return of the goddess isn't merely a religious phenomenon. It's a tectonic shift. It's a fundamental crack in the seemingly firm, unyielding ground of industrial civilization. And perhaps, just perhaps, it's also a powerful warning. Because if we insist on burying the sacred, on paving over our deepest connections with cold, hard concrete, that concrete might one day inevitably crack. And from that very crack, something that history tried so desperately to suffocate, something that still pulses with incredible life, something that vividly remembers, something that profoundly bleeds and is reborn, might just violently sprout. Everything that was suppressed, everything that was pushed down, eventually returns, not necessarily in the neat, expected form, but as a disruptive crack in the dominant logic, as an undeniable discomfort amidst the mundane routine, as a deep, aching longing for what was never truly lived, but which the body in its innate wisdom instantly recognizes. The original religion is indeed returning, not as a rigid, organized belief system with institutions and hierarchies, but as a profound, compelling restlessness in the soul. Not as a complex doctrine to be memorized, but as a primal thirst for connection. It returns powerfully when women sing together in a circle, without the need for microphones or elevated pulpits, their voices weaving ancient melodies. It returns when a body, weary of shame and judgment, finally allows itself to truly feel without guilt. It returns when someone makes the conscious, radical choice to plant a seed, to heal a wound, to simply silence the external noise and listen to the internal whispers. There are current growing records of small but determined communities actively reconstructing practices based on these ancient matriarchal rituals. Humble cults to the earth, joyous celebrations of the solstices, sacred lunar rituals. They don't seek external recognition or power. They simply seek meaning, a profound sense of purpose and connection. And the modern world, for all its busyness and distractions, is slowly but surely beginning to listen, even if it doesn't yet fully understand. Because ultimately, it's not about painstakingly going back to the literal past, but about powerfully remembering what the present has so tragically forgotten. The first religion of humanity was brutally erased from countless books, from official records, but it resiliently survived in the bones, and the bones, unlike history books, do not lie. This profound, ancient wisdom reminds us that the sacred isn't confined to a distant throne, but lives vibrantly in the warmth of a bonfire. It isn't etched in a rigid sentence, but breathes freely in a shared sigh. It isn't perched high above us, but pulses powerfully between us, connecting us all. And perhaps this awakened ancestral memory is truly preparing us for something immensely greater, something that modern reason, with all its limitations, simply cannot control, cannot contain, something that connects us fundamentally and profoundly to that which we call life. The original religion doesn't want followers, no. It simply wants awakened ones. And if you've made it all the way to this very point, perhaps, just perhaps, you've already heard the unmistakable call.